Everyone has a story. Extensively, every yogi has a story. Whether they come from a background of yoga practitioners or not, they have a story. Especially in the Western world, where yoga is not intrinsic to our society, there is still a phenomenon of new yoga teachers entering into the ether. On this podcast, we are venturing into the minds, the hearts, and the inspirations behind these yogis and asking them, of all the things that they can do in this world, why yoga? 74% of yoga teachers are women. About 21% of yoga teachers are men. Clearly, that's a minority there. So when you see a man practicing yoga or even teaching yoga, it's always a pleasure and a delight to see a change of variety. But I wanted to, for this episode, talk to someone who is amongst that 20%. William Moore is a doula. He's a semi-football player, an ex-semi-football player, a healthcare professional, a mentor, and an advocate in the community. He has such great insight, and he also works for Black Yoga Magazine. This conversation we had about his practice and his approach to yoga was so interesting and very important, and it's also very timeless. I know that you will find value in this discussion, and I hope to hear from you more and see you on the other end. Enjoy.
How have you been?
I've been good. How about yourself?
So it's been the goal of it. As I work in public health, I do a lot of COVID stuff. I'm in charge of all implementation of the reopening process for all schools and universities and vaccinations. It's been one heck of a day. And then yesterday I had all tech issues, so I'm catching up from a lot of stuff from yesterday too. So it's good. I'll never say that it's bad. Things could always be worse. But it's been a heck of a week.
Okay. I'm sure you work in public health, so I'm sure it's been a heck of a year for you at this point.
Oh my goodness. My goodness. It definitely has. But again, honestly, I feel like I can't complain about anything because, when I'm, out in the community or whatever, or we do outreach or, passing out stuff about vaccinations, you run into so many folks who has been out of work and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You won't catch me complaining about nothing. You know what I mean? Like I'm lucky and privileged to be where I'm at. So I'm not gonna complain.
That's good. Yeah, I just can't imagine what you're going through. I'm sure you've had to do a lot of education on what the vaccine is, especially in our community, because we have every right to be
and that's what I was actually going to interject and says, do a lot of education in our community, but at the same time, I'm very upfront with my supervisors. And my leadership is actually I got to say, they're very good about listening to it too. And I'm just like, y'all got to understand, A, it's going to take time. And B, some of this stuff we just going to have to accept. Because I live in the same community that I work. I'm not one of these people who does work in the community but lives way out wherever and then I live in the same community I work. And so I tell them, I was like, you got to realize, some of our folks, rightfully so, we don't trust the system. We don't trust public health. It don't matter if it's a black face coming to them. If you represent public health, we don't trust it. I said, and a lot of our folks is like, we're going to wait. We're going to wait to see what it do to everybody else. And if everybody else come out, it's okay. Then we might line up. We might line up. We're not definitely line up. We might line up.
Just might. You hear me? Because I'm one of the ones, I'm going to wait to see what happens.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. And I ain't mad at it. And like I said, I've been telling my leadership, they got to be patient with that. We can do all the outreach and stuff we want to, but you have to understand that generational trauma that's been passed down. And a lot of that stuff, it's not just even mental, especially when you start to get into epigenetics and stuff like that, it's down at the cellular level in your DNA. It's not even a conscious thing. We're subconsciously reacting to that. We have an adverse reaction to that on a subconscious level. So it takes time. You know what I mean? You can't destroy people for decades and then in 24 hours think that you can repair that.
Mm-hmm. Expect them to just say, oh, well, yeah, now I trust you.
Exactly. Exactly.
It doesn't work that way. So let's get into these questions, Will.
No problem.
So I have you onto the podcast right now because I want to talk to you about your inspiration behind yoga, which is why the show is called Why Yoga. I know that you are a professional. You work with Black Yoga Magazine. I could talk about your accolades forever, but as we said, Google him and you will be able to find it out. But I want to know, of all the things that you could do, why are you practicing yoga and why are you using it as a tool for activism? I feel that you're using it for. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no. You're absolutely right. So first and foremost, I honestly I got into yoga by accident. It was not something that I intended to do. I remember trying it, just by happenstance, maybe more than 10 years ago, with a couple of my friends at the gym. Matter of fact, a couple of the guys I played football with in college, we had worked out, then went and tried a yoga class afterwards, which I don't advise for anybody because, what we didn't know is yoga is a whole
It's a
a
whole different
whole work. That's a whole different thing. And trying to do that after powerlifting, it just did not work out. But I just didn't take it serious, to be honest with you. Especially as a man, when we grow up and we thinking about what working out looks like or what it's supposed to be, it's about working out is supposed to be a quote unquote masculine thing, right? And so what we equate to masculinity as men, and especially Black men, when it comes to working out, that's lifting weights, throwing weights around. And with me being a former athlete, that's just why I saw it. But what had happened is I also played semi-pro football, and I was coming up on my last season, and it was preseason. I was doing a lot of weight training and stuff, getting ready for preseason. And to be quite honest with you, my body was starting to become my casket. Like all the years of playing ball, all the injuries, waking up sore every day, not being able to move. Like it got to the point my IT bands had gotten so bad that I could barely get up or sit down. Like I had to hold on to stuff. And so and I thought like, oh, just like anything else, like you push through it and eventually it'll get better. Things got worse to the point so like progressively after about 3 weeks of going through that, I made an appointment, went to go see my doctor. So I went to go see my doctor, and she's the one who kind of put me through a series of exercises or whatever. And she was like, yeah, so basically, she's like, oh, yeah, I know what this is. She's like, so basically, your IT bands are trash. She was like, she's like, you're super tight. Um, and she actually used to be a former athlete as well. So she knows how athletes respond to stuff, how your body responds. She knows our mindset of wanting to keep pushing through things. She just has a different approach to it than just a normal doctor. And she said, so you got several options. She goes, you can stop lifting weights for about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, give your body time to rest, and you got to stretch, you need to stretch, to work on different stretches to stretch your body out. Um, or, and I was like, that's not an option. I was like, the season's about to, about to start. I can't do that. She said, or you could try something like yoga. And I was like, yoga? She's like, yeah. She's like, it's still a workout, but she said the basics behind it is she's like, you need something to stretch out your IT band. She's like, you need to improve on your flexibility. And through your flexibility, it will help you heal better. It will improve your endurance, all that type of stuff. So begrudgingly, I said yes. I didn't say yes because I was gung-ho about it and really wanted to do it and was into it, or even that I respected it. It was a means to an end. It was like, all right, I got to do something so I could, get together and be able to go into the season. So let me just go ahead and do it. So I went to one class at the local YMCA and struggled. I was watching all these, old women do it and stuff like that. And they were holding poses so gracefully, for like 60 seconds, 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. Here I am, grown man, big as all can be, muscles everywhere, yada, yada, yada. Sweating hard, legs shaking and trembling. I couldn't hold on to the poses. If you watch Animal Planet and they show you when all the baby animals come out during the spring, like the baby deer and their legs are shaking and all that. That's what I look like in warrior pose.
Were you like a baby giraffe?
Oh yeah. Okay. That's what I look like in warrior pose. The quads were not holding up. It was a bad situation. And I was just embarrassed. Mm-hmm. But what had happened is my competitive nature kicked in. I was like, oh no, I can't go out like
you're not gonna go down. Mm-hmm.
I see all these see all these older women in here like looking all graceful, and I'm over here look like I'm dying. I was like, I can't go out like that. So I decided to actually go into it, like put everything into it, mind, body, and soul. Like, I'm going to do this. I want to get good at this. And it no longer was even about like getting ready for football season. It was like me getting over the fact of being humbled like that in a yoga class. So I just kept, I started going to bookstores, getting books on it, reading magazines about it. I went into the local Dick's Sporting Goods, got me a yoga mat, all that type of stuff, and I kept going to classes, right? And then an amazing thing happened. Out of the blue, I just started noticing that like a lot of the aches and pains that I initially had, I didn't have them anymore, and I was like, wow. And then I also started to notice, and it wasn't just by myself. I think people close to me started to point it out too, like how my attitude started to change towards certain things, right? Uh, I seem to be a little bit more calmer in like high stress situations. And I've always been a laid back person to begin with, but they saw like an extra level coming out, right? Um, I started to be more present, notice things that I never noticed before, that are literally in my line of sight and around me on an everyday basis, but I never paid attention to them. All of that I attributed to yoga. It was because of yoga um, that happened, um, and it kind of hit me like a tidal wave. It was just like, what, like, and I think at that time of my life too, like I was primed for like change and evolution anyway. I was going through a lot of other things, as well too, like changing in careers, like whole career focus. In my personal life, I was going through changes, and so I was just primed and ready to go to have something like implemented into my life to help bring about this change in a more holistic way or in a healthier way. Because a lot of people when they start to go through like life changes, stuff like that, like they freak out, right? They have like their midlife crisis, they're losing it, they start getting reckless and do wild things. I found that I was able to dive headfirst in the yoga, yeah, and really just kind of, it's hard to even articulate, but I just felt good. You know what I mean? Like I felt good mentally, I felt good physically, I felt good like energetically, and I wanted more of it. I just got addicted to it. And so like that's how I like got into yoga, and that's what kept me. Um and then, kind of fast forward, as now that I'm in yoga, I start to notice that I also like I'm the only person that looks like me attending my yoga classes. Um and that kind of, it's not something that I'm new to. I mean, I went to a private middle school. Most of the people there were white. I went to I played sports at a private Division II college in Minnesota, which is a state, once you get out of, Minneapolis, St. Paul, predominantly white. Um, but it just gets, you just kind of get to a point where sometimes you're just kind of tired of that. You know what I mean? And in some spaces, you're just like, I'm tired of ignoring that. And I need a space where I can walk into and um, I feel I feel like-minded energy. I feel energy that resonates with me, that resonates with my struggle as like a black person. I think all black people kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about when you walk into a predominantly white space and you feel this. It's kind of like a negative undercurrent. Like maybe those folks aren't even necessarily trying to make you feel uncomfortable, but it's that energy that they put off where you just know you're different, and it kind of makes you feel like you don't belong there. And I think the last draw for me is when I was at a store and a young lady came up to me and she's like, "Hey, you do yoga at the such and such YMCA, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, like how do you know?" Because even when I lift weights, I always work out with a hoodie on and I have the hood up. I'm not one of those people who's like all about showing who you are. I always work out with, even when I do yoga, I have a hoodie on, hood up, everything. I'm just trying to be on my face, right? And then she said, "Yeah, because you're like one of the only guys there." She goes, "Let's just be honest." She goes, "Let's just be honest." She's like, "You're the only black guy there." And I was just like, yeah, you're right. You know what I mean? And that was kind of like the last straw. And I was just like, I need to find something to help me feel like I belong in this space. And so I started looking for magazines, yoga magazines, because still I'm at that state where I'm trying to deepen my practice and learn more about it. Because even though I've been going consistently, and I know more about it, I still have a very rudimentary knowledge of it. Right, even when I'm still in class and the teacher is guiding us through poses and stuff, there's certain poses that I don't even know what they are because I haven't had any formal teaching. So I, like a third of the class, like I'm like looking around, seeing what people are doing, so I can get in the proper pose. Or, I don't have an instructor at the time who can walk by and articulate to me, how to perfect a certain posture. So, I'm really trying to do a lot of this stuff on my own. And I can't find any publications, anything with a black man or woman on a cover or even inside. Or wasn't to, it's almost like it's almost like I manifested it, to be honest with you, because I'm like messing around on Instagram that same week where I'm like getting frustrated about not being able to find a publication or anything that expresses that black and brown people do yoga. I see an ad for Black Yoga Magazine.
I saw the same ad. That's why I said,
Yeah. And
yeah.
so I saw the ad. Yo, I didn't even take time to really research it, verify it, nothing. I was like, I'm supporting. And I pulled out my credit card and I like subscribed to it. Like, I got to do this. And while I was at it, I was doing a podcast. I had a podcast at the time. I still do, but I don't, I don't record on it as much because I'm so busy these days. And I was like, let me send a little message, to whoever, runs this magazine to see if they wouldn't mind being interviewed on my podcast. Totally not thinking that anybody's going to reply because you know how that goes. Social media, especially to, companies or corporations, or to be quite honest, like, as my sisters will tell you, like, if a man sends a message to a woman, they always think like, what
It's
type
going
of,
down in a DM type of deal.
like
Yeah.
person's dubious intentions. So I just sent the messages asking, hey, how's it going? Want to know if you'd be interested in being on a podcast. Yo, she replied to me maybe an hour later. Her name is Ashley Adams. She replied to me like an hour later, was like, yeah, I would love to. So we exchanged information, talked on the phone, scheduled the podcast interview. I had her on my podcast. She had me on hers. And it was just perfect. And I remember, before we get off the phone, I was like, yo, you don't understand like how good this made me feel to see somebody out here in the yoga world, like representing for black and brown folks so that we feel included in this space. Because it's like, even though this is a discipline that was, invented and curated by black and brown folks, when it comes to the Western hemisphere, the Western side of the world, it's
Not
been,
there.
yeah, it's been, it's been co-opted and made to feel like we don't have any, this is not a space for us. I said, I don't care what I got to do. I said, I want to see you to succeed. I said, it means something for me to see you succeed, because I need to see more black and brown people know that it feels comfortable and that it's okay to participate in this in such a cool discipline that not only helps you physically, but mentally and emotionally. And I was like, and I want my, what I'm saying, like my nieces and nephews, and whenever I have children, I want them to be able to see, uh, that a black woman started this and can run this, and that there's a space for us. And that's how it kind of just, that's how the collaboration just started, working. Like I started off as just like a contributor, and then like a paid writer, and then was asked to become COO of the magazine. And that's what I've been doing ever since, along with my public health work.
That's fantastic. So how do you feel that the work that you guys are doing and yourself is helping the Black community heal?
Well, number one of the things that I think is really awesome is like, through the magazine and through Yoga Blue, which is the studio that Ashley does a lot of the yoga classes through. We've managed to
Oh,
get.
I meant to say
I was certified through BYM, just to let you know.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. So
Yeah, in
then
April.
yeah. So
I
then you
should have
know
said
what,
that.
you never said that.
I'm sorry.
Well, then you part of the fam. So there we go. Then I,
Yes.
that's there we go. You're part of
Yeah.
the family. I never knew that.
Yeah.
We always say we got family everywhere. This is proof
Yes,
of
we
it.
do.
It's proof of it. Um, I just kind of see it helping us in the community because for one, we're certifying so many folks to become certified, become like certified yoga instructors.
Isn't
And
it
what this means,
3,000 so far?
yeah, and what this
Yeah.
means is each and every one of those people can take take their knowledge back into their community in their own homes and teach those who are up under their roof or in their community how to self-regulate mentally and emotionally, right? How to, because what yoga really is about, like yoga isn't necessarily about, it's not about like, poses or hyper flexibility. That's not what it's about at all. I know that that's what's glamorized and I know that's what folks see and that's what they think about. But what it's really about is pulling back the layers, being present and learning more about you. Each individual person, like your practice is your practice. Your practice is about you, pulling back the layers, learning more about yourself, learning more about how far you can push yourself, but also learning how you tick too, right? Learning what motivates you, what makes you go, um, what what ails you deep down. You know what I mean? Also, what heals you. You know what I mean? It is a way for some people. The way I've heard some people explain it. People who are dealing with different traumas and stuff like that. It's a way of self-medicating, and that sounds like a way better way of self-medicating to me than drinking and doing drugs and stuff like that, which is a way that so many other folks do self-medicate. Not casting dispersions or shaming folks who do that, because we all have our battles, uh, and we all suffer through our own issues. And to those folks, I just say, again, not casting shame or casting dispersions. You know what I'm saying? It's still all love. And I hope that you can heal however you need to. But if possible, try us. You know what I'm saying? Like try yoga. You know what I mean? Like try a more holistic way of healing. You know what I mean? Because unlike other ways of self-medicating, which are just about like filling a hole that never gets filled, right? Yoga enables you to figure out why is the hole there to begin with, and then realizing that even with that hole there, you're actually enough. Like you with all your flaws are enough, because so many of us deal with that. A lot of us have gotten used to putting on the charade of, if somebody were to ask you directly, do you like yourself, do you love yourself, do you feel whole, do you believe in yourself, almost everybody to a T be like, well, yeah, I'm bad, I'm this, that, and the other, I'm off the chain, I'm cold. But deep down,
Deep
most people
down.
don't feel that way. And I believe that COVID has exposed a lot of folks for that, right? Because a lot of folks, don't, who say that they do the work, um, and they look inward and they learn about themselves. They only go to a certain point. They only peel back the
The
first couple
first
superficial,
layer.
yep, those first superficial layers, right? And before it gets too uncomfortable, and they have to peel back the layers and look at the things about themselves that they don't like, because we all got stuff about ourselves that we don't like. We distract ourselves with TV shows, with
Social
friends,
media.
going out, social media, drinking. Sometimes it's work. Sometimes we distract ourselves with working out. All sorts of different ways of distraction, of not facing who we are. What COVID and the lockdown did is take all of that away. COVID
You had
really,
no choice.
COVID really took away a lot of distractions for folks, and things that people were able to distract themselves with initially during the lockdown became so boring that it was no longer a distraction, and that little voice in their head and in their heart that was screaming out to them like, "Yeah, you about to pay attention to me," got louder and louder. And what we saw was a lot of people who didn't have the tools lost their minds. Like we saw suicide rates go up. We saw domestic violence rates go up. All these different things. And it's not to say that the reason for a lot of those folks' stresses weren't warranted. You know what I mean? Like the threat of not being able to feed your family is a
That's
real
legitimate.
fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's legitimate. The threat and thought of not being able to keep a roof over your head, that is legitimate. You know what I mean? Um, outside of those, there are some other things about ourselves that the world has programmed, some of us since birth, that we are supposed to place all our faith and believe in, that aren't necessary, such as how other people think about us, right? Such as that what makes me a
Valuable.
human or a valuable person
Mm-hmm.
is how much I can provide for somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even how much I can provide for myself, right? Because I'll tell you right now, like, yeah, it's important to provide for yourself, but you know what's more important than that? Loving yourself,
Oof.
being okay with who you are. That's
That's
more
the
important
that's
than
that's
providing
the
for
hardest
yourself.
part there.
Yeah, that's the more, and I'll prove to you why that matters. Because I remember uh, a long time ago, and it never made more sense to me than after like these past couple years when I got really engrossed in yoga. Watching Discovery Channel. I'm a geek, so I watch Discovery Channel, History Channel, stuff like that. And there was this TV series, and it was based around uh, these um, these folks discovering this like hidden tribe in the Amazon, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they did is they pulled an experiment and they pulled some of them out and they introduced them to the real world. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember seeing the way those people lived, and they were so happy, so joyous, right? And being like, man, like, and I was like, how are they able to do that? I was like, because every day for me, what it looked like to me is like every day of their life is like a struggle. Like they can't just go to the supermarket. Like you got to hunt and gather for your food, or your tribe and your family's not gonna make it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When
Mhm.
it's, you know what I'm saying, like the rainy season, like there is just no lock all the doors and all that type of stuff. Like they have
Yeah.
to account for all of that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But these people seem so happy. You didn't hear about any of them like dying of like and it's, you know, like you just didn't hear of any of them like,
Having the diseases and things we
yeah,
have.
have different diseases and just perishing from just crazy stuff like we do. And so they took a couple of them to the city, right?
Mhm.
And I can't remember what city it was. I think it was somewhere. It was somewhere out like in the Midwest, I want to say.
Mhm.
And I remember they kind of filmed two of the indigenous folks kind of walking through the city, and as they're walking around, they translated, and two of them said, "I don't understand it. There's so many buildings here, but there's so many people who sleep on their streets." And he said, "Why is that?" And the other one said, "I think because nobody loves them."
Wow.
And
Wow.
so to me, it might, now to them it might have meant something different, but like in hindsight, looking at it now, like to me, on a much more like on a larger scale, what it said, what that meant, that what that moment meant and said to me is, look how much we've placed on like material things and how we live our lives, right? That the simple act of providing for somebody else or loving yourself seems to be missing from a lot of us. You know what I mean? Like the first thing that came out of these indigenous folks' mouths wasn't about, they didn't have anything to barter with,
You don't have
wasn't
any money
these,
or no
yeah, wasn't
job.
that, yeah, it wasn't that, oh, these people did anything wrong, wasn't, are these people crazy, wasn't, are these people sick, it was, no one must love them.
Yeah. That's
And I
very
think about,
true.
yeah, and I think from the standpoint of like, how can you love anybody else when you don't love yourself? I'm just saying in general, you can answer it if you want to, but you can answer it if you want to, sure.
How can you love anyone else without loving yourself? I think that it all starts here. Just like I feel it always starts with the breath. Like whenever someone is like going through something or they come to me, I guess I don't know why they come to me for advice because I'm still trying to figure the shit out myself. But they come to me, I'm like, okay, you need to bring it back to your breath. All of these things are happening externally, but you're not taking care of what's going on internally. And then it's like a constant cycle of it reacting with what's going on outside of you. So I feel that you expecting love to come from the outside and it's not starting from within first, it's that cycle is not going to flow well because it has to start here before it gets out and able to come back in.
Yeah,
Am I
and some
making
of us,
sense? Yeah.
it is because the thing you think about is so many of us are so busy worrying and thinking about so many other things, we don't even have time to process and think about what you just said, right? And so from the scientific standpoint, the act of taking those breaths and breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which will allow you to calm down, drop those cortisol levels in your brain, and make room for you to have those type of thoughts.
Yeah. I get what you mean. I'll never forget when I used to work in healthcare, but when I was working in healthcare, 5 years, my blood pressure was through the roof. I could not get it to come down. And it was at a point where my doctor even said, okay, you need to find a different place to work because it is becoming too much. But because I knew yoga, I was able to, okay, get back into the practice and say, I need to learn how to need to breathe a little bit because what's happening is that when your blood pressure is high, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, as a professional, there's a lack of oxygen in your blood.
Yeah, it constricts the amount of oxygen to the brain,
Yes,
which your brain needs that oxygen to be able to process information and think.
yes,
I.e., you're not thinking properly, and because
yes,
you're in fight or flight mode, those cortisol
exactly.
levels have risen. You're in fight or flight mode, and you can't think about anything. Which again, like I said, what you said makes total sense because when you're able to practice yoga, and one of the major parts about yoga is breathing, right? When you learn how to breathe, decrease those cortisol levels, let that oxygen go to your brain, let your brain, let your, the different parts of your brain light up and function to full capacity, you're able to process information better, right? You're able to all of a sudden to think about that one thing that was setting you off and making you ready to go off and potentially lose your job or get locked up or do whatever, do something stupid. All of a sudden you're able to think and you're like, actually, what am I upset about?
What am I tripping for?
What am I tripping for? You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
It has nothing to do with me. There's been plenty of times that I can say, especially that I learned like after doing yoga, when I found myself in situations, uh, where people are upset, or even maybe they're snapping at me or whatever, you know what I mean? Because sometimes I do community engagement events. And when you do
Mm.
community engagement events, sometimes the community gonna let you have it. They're gonna let you
You
know
might
what they
get some
think about
smoke.
certain things,
Yeah.
especially being that I work for local government, right? um, I'm able to take a breath. I'm able to activate, what I'm saying, really use the full capacity of my brain, and sit there and say, like, they're upset, but their issue's not with me. Their issues with the history of this organization, right? And if I want to get through to them, we need to change how this organization operates so that they can live in a less stressful environment and have a less stressful existence. And now all of a sudden they can process much better and everything isn't life or death for them.
Yeah. See, that's absolutely amazing that you're able to do that. I think also breathing helps me communicate better because I'm not if my body, my mind, and my soul is in fight or flight mode, then the things I say will be fight or flight, And I'm sure that you probably practice that as well in your community
Right.
work, right? Is
It's
that
about right. It's about being in harmony, right? You just said for you to communicate better, like your heart, mind, body, breath, all got to be in harmony, right? Well, in yoga, what is it about? Our breath and our movements have to be in harmony, right? We always talk about matching our breaths with our movements. And when we match our breaths with our movements, all of a sudden, that posture, that pose that we used to not be able to get into or hold for very long, it's effortless, right? We don't even realize how long we've been in it. And maybe we've been in that pose for 2 to 3 minutes, right? It's all about harmony. All these little things are practices or details of things that we learn both consciously and subconsciously through yoga. And it's so very important for Black and Brown community because look at the trauma we've been dealing with for it's so 1619. It is now 2021. So now 402 years since we've been here in this country, right? We've been in this country for 402 years. Um, And you got to think, it took one of the bloodiest wars in history, being the Civil War. You can look it up. It's one of the top 5 bloodiest wars in the history of the world. It took one of the bloodiest wars in the history of the world just for us to get freedom on paper. I say that specifically on paper.
On paper.
Because we still had Jim Crow. We still have, the prison industrial complex that we have going on today through the, that sees Black and brown people unjustly imprisoned at a rate of 80% more than white folks who experiment with drugs and alcohol at the same rate.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We see harsher prison sentences. We have structural systematic racism that infiltrates not only our jobs, but how we get our food, our living situations, where we're allowed to live, absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then you bring in epigenetics, which is the study that shows that you can carry trauma from the cellular level and pass it down from generation to generation. Not only are you still dealing with the trauma that they are facing today on an everyday basis, they're dealing with the traumas that our ancestors have had and been passed down.
Ago. Mm-hmm.
Right? So we need this more than anybody.
Yep.
That's why we're on a mission to spread yoga to Black and brown communities so much. We need this more than anybody. Because while some people might say, well, look at Black and brown people, they've been here, for 402 years. Immigrants have come to this country and have made more in less time. They've also not been through what we've been through, right?
They have not. They have not come with. Mm-hmm.
Right. And despite what we've been through, still look at what we have accomplished.
Yeah.
Look at how many Black firsts are out there. Look how many records and look how much history Black folks have made in this country, despite what we have been through our 402 years of being in this country.
And Will, I'll say this. I'm not in the UK anymore, but I just got back from being over there for 8 months. And they have a Black History Month. It's in October. But one of the things that was most very important to me was when you go through like the Black history like videos, and I even went to some museums, like the exhibits, everybody's Black American. But I thought that was just very telling. But the most criticism I had, like people ask me all the time, why don't Black Americans have it together? And I'm just like, do we not have it together? Because you guys really love looking to us for inspiration. And I think it's just very telling that, they look, people look to us for inspiration. And we've been able to accomplish so much in 400 years. At the same time, there's just this, I guess America wants it to look like we just don't do anything. Do you know what I mean?
Well, now I know exactly what you're talking about. I call it the greatest trick that white supremacy's ever pulled. White supremacy is like the greatest magician in the world. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because it has even been able to convince a lot of Black folks that we aren't that influential. Everybody knows how influential American Black folks are, but American Black folks in some way. You know why? We drive music, we drive all sorts of culture, we dominate dang near every major sport.
Everyone.
We do our hair a certain way, everybody wants to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We wear our jeans a certain way, everybody wants to do it. We start wearing any type of shoes, everybody wants to do it. Even our food, soul food, right? Which is horrible for you, right? Was supposed to be slop, leftovers, handed over to slaves. Then we got everybody wanting to start soul food restaurants, not just Black people, white people too.
And it's the only authentic American cuisine is soul food.
Exactly. And so you look at that, everybody knows how dominant and how influential Black folks are, except for Black folks in a way. Yeah. Because if we truly knew that, you couple that with how much money annually Black people spend in America.
Well,
I'm talking trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
If we all decided,
I think it's almost at $2 trillion at this point. But go on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If we all decided, you know what? We raising the price on how much y'all utilize us for your entertainment. Yeah. We raising the price on how much y'all utilize us for your fashion. Mm-hmm. Or you know what, better yet, we're not giving y'all money for anything. We're all going to start doing Black owned, or whatever we don't have already, we're going to invest in one another so we can, stake claim and manufacture said product or whatnot. Mm-hmm. This country, the financial infrastructure of this country would almost fall apart.
Yeah.
right? The rest of the world knows that. We are the only ones who don't seem to recognize that en masse. I'm not saying none of us recognize it. A lot of us do. But at a concentrated, organized effort to recognize that en masse, we're the only ones that don't get that. Why do you think that there's such a push to denigrate us and hold us back anytime we try to make some type of a movement?
Mm-hmm. I just watched a movie about that this past weekend, The Black Messiah. Judas and the Black Messiah. Did you see it yet?
I did not see it. And the reason I didn't see it, actually I will not see any movie like that, is because I'm tired
of black trauma on film.
I'm tired of watching black trauma films. Mm-hmm. I'm tired of watching, black death smut on TV. Mm-hmm. I know what happened. I was a history major in college. I know what happened to my ancestors. I don't need to know that. Mm-hmm. People who believe in white supremacy and subscribe to white supremacy, they need to watch that.
They need to watch it.
I'm not interested in watching movies like that. I'm interested in learning how we turn back the clock, or start building more leaders in our community and build up our community infrastructure from the inside out. I'm no longer interested really in, all this talk about,
what happened.
I want to change. I want to change and get rid of white supremacy. But what's more important to me, what's more than that, is how do we elevate Black people from within, right? How do we do stuff like practice group economics, self-love, group love towards one another? Because sitting back and waiting for your oppressor to change things, how has that worked for us in 402 years? Mm-hmm. So the thing is, what can we do for ourselves to make things better for ourselves? So I would rather turn the focus into what can we do for ourselves to make things better for ourselves, and once we have galvanized ourselves and organized ourselves enough to that point, then we move towards dismantling the rest. Or I'm even willing to do them both at the same time. But my emphasis has always been on what can we do for one another and what can we do for ourselves.
Now, well, do you think that we aren't doing that? Because I always tell people I don't know if it's just my circles, but the circles and the people that, the community that I have is about that life. If I could, that's how I'm just going to say about that life,
No, wholeheartedly, I will say I believe that we're doing it, but we're not doing it in a big enough fashion. I think the problem is that we see it in small pockets. Like your circle does it. I have a couple people in my circle who do it. Mm-hmm, but again, get all the money collectively that we spend in this country. As I'm paraphrasing, but as I heard my man Nas say, we busy putting other people's kids through college, but we can't put our own kids through college. Mm. We spending dollars making it possible for other people to put their kids through college without loans and no debt. Mm-hmm. But we got to look for loans to get ours, right?
Yeah, I hear you. I feel like with our generation, I don't know your age specifically, I feel like this is not a slight to our grandparents and our parents, I feel like that is something that is taking place. Maybe I'm just too optimistic.
So I'll push back from this standpoint. Okay. I'm not going to say that that's something that's taking place that they didn't do it, because we're forgetting the Black Wall Streets and stuff like that. People history likes to whitewash things. People think that there was only a Black Wall Street. There was a Black Wall Street in every major city.
Yeah, there were multiple.
And what happened was, through stuff like, white supremacist projects such as urban renewal, tearing these communities apart, laying down freeways and stuff like that, or just flat out terrorizing and killing people in a community, those things got abolished. Mm-hmm. What happened was, what I think our biggest fault is, there's not enough of a connection between generations that there should be. I look at that is because that is an example of us being more Americanized. Because when you look at other cultures that come to this country, immigrate to this country, it's not abnormal to see, 2-3 different generations live in a household. Only in America is it looked at to be like you're a failure if you still live under the same roof as your parents or grandparents. That's not looked at as a failure in other cultures. And the reason why they do it is not because somebody isn't successful, right? There's a passing down of knowledge that goes down in those said situations, right? There is a sort of dependency that comes out of situations like that, such as grandparents passing down knowledge while also taking care of grandkids while parents going to work. Children taking care of the grandparents so that they're not put away in some nursing home and can live out the last of their days happy and happy with their family, when they leave this earth. We don't really do that like other cultures do. And so I think if there wasn't as much of a disconnect like that, I think that we would be even better at it, because we could be able to pick the brains of our ancestors who were alive during that time and say, how did y'all do it? Right? Where did y'all start? Take those different tidbits and those bits of knowledge, apply it to what we're doing these days, and make whatever necessary changes we need to make so that it's relevant and works or during our current time. Because there wasn't such thing as a black economy back then, right? But what happened is too, when we went to the civil rights movement, our educational system had a hand in this too. They fooled all of us into believing that we integrated. We didn't integrate; we were assimilated. Because when you integrate, you mesh with a different culture, or you mesh within a different system while keeping your own culture, your own practices, your own beliefs, all your own things, but you just function to, and work collaboratively with other ones. We gave all that stuff up. In some communities, we gave those things up. The ones that weren't burned down and terrorized, but through white supremacy, or weren't destroyed through urban renewal, some of us gave up our grocery stores just so we could go shop at, the grocery store in the white neighborhood, because finally we're allowed to do that. So their stuff must be better. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not one thing that solves the whole, the whole issue. It's several different things put together that would change the dynamic for us.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But I do want to bring it back to yoga, because I have another podcast where we could talk about Black group economics for hours. But we can do, if I want to bring you on that one, we could go all the way in. But now, as far as Black people on the mat, as a Black man, what would you say to another Black man who's apprehensive for yoga? Because it was really difficult to find brothers who were practicing. Thankfully, I know a few, but I want to talk to someone who I didn't know. So what would you say?
I'll push it to I'll tell some brothers like this. Some of y'all already doing it. You just calling it stretching.
Calling it what?
They just calling it stretching. That's what I would do. I would tell some brothers, some of y'all already doing it. You just calling it stretching. Because the thing is too, listen, we live in a male-dominated world, and especially with Black men, a lot of weight is placed behind, whether the activities you're doing are considered masculine or not. And so if it's not considered to be masculine, it's considered to be a sign of weakness. And the last thing that Black people can be in a country, built around white supremacy, we can't be perceived as being weak, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's once you're able to get them past that, embracing their embracing what masculinity is or could be, then you can open the door for a lot more conversations about a lot of other things. And I found that to be true in a lot of the group work that I do and the men's groups that I help facilitate. Really have the question about masculinity. Once you have the question about masculinity, what it is, where that message comes from, and if the messenger itself lives up to the perception of what masculinity is, then we open up a whole new world of possibilities of what we're able to do as Black men.
So why don't you elaborate with me on where masculinity comes from? Because I'm always screaming it into the void, and they don't hear me. So, break it down, Will.
I always tell people that when somebody asks me, well, what is masculinity? I tell them anything that I do, because I identify as a man and I identify as a masculine dude. So anything I do is a version of masculinity. See, the issue that a lot of us run into is, as human beings, what we like to do is we like to place limitations upon other people based on what we believe we can or cannot do, right? So if I can or cannot do something, then that person can or cannot do it, right? So I'll tell you a series of 4 questions that I ask every dude that would come to my men's group. I would say, what is the first question is, what is your definition or of masculinity? And they would give me like their definition of masculinity. Okay. And then the next question I would ask them is, where did that definition of masculinity come from? Could be TV, could be streets, could be a sibling, could be a cousin, could be friends, whatever would be the case. This is where it starts to get real interesting. Questions 3 and 4. So you've told me what your definition of masculinity is. You told me where your definition of masculinity came from. Does the place of the place where you got that definition of masculinity, do they or does it live up to that definition? Now you get people to really start to think about it, right? Because you start to see a lot of people starting to think that a lot of the people they've been listening to or a lot of the things they've been getting his messages from don't live up to that definition, right? There's a lot of do as I say, not as I do, right? Again, whatever I can or cannot do, and since I have I'm insecure and I have limitations on myself, I put limitations on you, right? So then the 4th question is, since you already told me what you identify as being masculine, and usually some of that is I can do what I want, how I want, when I want, this, that, and the other, then why did you just identify to me that you've been living up to somebody else's standard of masculinity? If you're your own man, why have you lived up to somebody else's standard of masculinity who doesn't even live up to that standard themselves? That's when you usually see minds being like really kind of cracked open. And that's because a lot of men realize that it's at that moment they've finally realized that they have never actually lived their lives for themselves. They live their lives for somebody else or based upon somebody else's guidelines or perceptions, right? And so once you've outlined that and you've identified that, then you can get men to then all of a sudden recognize that the possibilities for what I can do or what is considered to be masculine are so much larger and so much more than what I've ever seen or thought, right? So now all of a sudden, maybe I was interested in being a chef, right? I never knew what I want to do for a profession growing up. I've always liked cooking, but I can't do that because men don't do that, right? I've only seen women cook in my house or in the kitchen or whatever be the case. Now that I don't perceive that as being a feminine trait and that anybody can cook, now something that I absolutely love can be my profession that I can use to feed me and my family. Right? It's very important. And you see that bleed into all other different like parts of life. And that's huge to me. And so usually after answering that series of 4 questions, I'm able to have a lot more deeper conversations with other men about what it is they can or cannot do or what is in the realm of possibility for them. It doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily identify with masculinity the same exact way that I do, and that's fine. They're not supposed to. They're just supposed to know that whatever they identify as being masculine, there are a lot more possibilities than what they came into the room with.
So you feel that masculinity, it limits men?
I don't think masculinity itself limits men. I think people's definitions of masculinity limits men. Because remember, I just articulated at the beginning what you said when I said, people ask me like, what do I see as masculinity or what do I see as masculine? I said absolutely anything that I choose to do because I identify as a man and I believe myself to be masculine. So whatever it is that I choose to do, I look at that as being a form of masculinity.
I see. Okay. I don't know. When I think of masculinity, I feel that it is like a lot of things, a construct of white patriarchal society as masculinity is taught to us. And because of that, I feel that men have a lot of limitations. Like you said, they aren't able to explore things that they actually want to do for the fear of it not being considered manly enough. So,
right.
Yeah, that's just
and I don't think that that's an incorrect assessment either that you just made. I don't. Because if you look at a lot of the standards or regulations that Black men have held to themselves over the decades, none of those things, when you look back to the continent of where we came from or whatever, though, none of those things are indicative of traits that you see in Africa.
What do you mean? Break that down.
For instance, like men always having to be like the dominant person in the household and this and stuff like that, and ordering women around and stuff like that. That's not something that you see. You know what I mean? Like it in the continent, like there may be some cultural variations of that. There may be some tribal hierarchies that dictate that. But when you look at a lot of, because I have friends from Africa. When you look at a lot of those homes and those households, like in some of those houses, like women are the backbone, right? They're not subordinate or to whatever a man dictates and says and it has to follow. There's a contract, a symbiotic relationship in those relationships. Only when we came here did the whole idea of men run the show, men do everything runs through men, become an edict or law.
Yeah.
Or perception. That's never been a thing.
And what some of the most
I was going to say between our partners.
Some of the most I guess you can say the ones that I've heard about rebellions against the colonizers in Africa, specifically Nigeria, have been from women in villages because colonizers were trying to either pay them less for the work they were doing, or they were taking away their rights. So I think it's very important to realize that everybody in the community has a role to play, and like exactly. You said, a symbiotic contract. I like that. I'm going to use that. I even had a conversation with someone last night. I posted like you share something on your Instagram story, and it was like a gaslighting image of saying, "Oh, propose to a man or be alone forever." And I was like, "This is like extreme." Derek Jackson posted it. He is just he's a headache of mine. I hate when he comes up on my feed, but my friend messaged me, was like, he just didn't understand. And it was a woman on her knees. And I'm like, first off, when I get married, I don't want anybody proposing. Don't get on your knees. You don't have to do that. It's not that big of a deal. It doesn't make you less of a man or less of a woman or anything of that nature if you don't get on your knees. Like, it's a symbiotic relationship. That's all.
I always tell people, remember one thing. Rules are always made by people in power.
Mm-hmm.
Rules are always made by people in power. Just think, the whole idea about coming to job interviews in suits and dressed really nice or whatever. Who made that rule? Whoever was running the company, the company at the time, whoever's in power. Think about how them folks at Google dress up, because the person in power at Google dresses like what?
Like they at home.
Exactly. Rules are always made by people in power. So even when I do my family work, as a doula, and I do like co-parenting work and stuff like that, I always tell people, don't base the standards and agreements in your relationship based on outside world or what everybody else approves of. I was like, whatever works for you. I said, I don't even care if I wouldn't do what you do in your relationship. If what you do in your relationship, legitimately, both people agree on it, and legitimately, both people feel happy and fed, then that's what's right for you. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks.
Great. Now, do you so you do work as a doula. What is co-parenting? Is that a part of your doula practice?
Well, yeah, it's really important work, because what it happens to do with it, what it comes down to is like really sitting down and talking with parents about the contract that they're going to make with each other, the agreements that they're going to make with each other, to make sure that they're both there to make sure that child grows up happy and healthy and reaching all their early childhood milestones, right? sometimes you got to explain to people what co-parenting is. For instance, I had a mom one time at a conference I was at. The topic came about co-parenting, and she was talking about her situation, and she was like, yeah, because I'm a single mom and this, that, and the other, and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, okay. I was like, so the dad, it really isn't there much. She's like, oh, no, he's there. She's like, he gets the kids half the week. And I was like, oh, but you do mainly. She's like, no, he does his home, he does the homework with him, stuff like that. I said, oh, but maybe you buy all the food, whatever. Literally everything she rattled off down the line, like, he had a hand in too. I said, ma'am, you're not a single parenting. I said, ma'am, you're not a single parent. You just by yourself. You ain't got a man. I was like, you co-parenting. I was like, when you say single parent, what you've done is you've invalidated all the work that their father does as if you're doing things by yourself. You might be single in terms of a relationship, but you're not single parenting, you're co-parenting. There's a difference. You know what I mean? And it can go the opposite way too. Like a dad could have custody of the kids, but if that mom is doing her part too, like he's not a single parent. Y'all co-parenting. Y'all just don't live in the same house. And there's a difference. And co-parenting doesn't always mean that the parents aren't together either. You know what I mean? Co-parenting is just that. It indicates that the parents are working together to provide and care for the child. And as simple as that sounds, that still got to be articulated for a lot of folks. Because like I said, a lot of people don't know the difference between being a co-parenting, the quote unquote single parent thing, or this, that, and the other. And I have to have that conversation as well with, professionals, people who do home visits, like home visiting nurses, and really let them know that the language you use in these meetings can really send a lot of conscious and subconscious messages to your client about their family dynamic, whether they be positive or negative.
Well, what was your inspiration, actually? I'm getting to your typical questions now. What was your inspiration behind becoming a doula?
So with that too, much like everything else, fell into it by accident. Like honestly, wow. I was helping facilitate.
I feel like there's a book. I think there's like a book like Accidental something, like Accidental Hero or something like that. I'm listening. Go on.
I was helping facilitate, my monthly men's group. I got asked by a couple of the public health nurses who were facilitating the women's group that went on at the same time if I would start attending this bi-monthly meeting that we would have called Birth Equity Community Council, called BEC. And it's about addressing inequities and basically inequities within child and maternal health, within the maternal death rate and infant mortality rate in our community, and disparities. And so I would attend that, and that it's open to everybody, professionals, community members, everything. And I remember like a year into it, and another thing, a goal of the group is always to think about innovative ways to address those disparities. So about a year into it, we're trying to think of some new ways that we can do that to make some impact in the community. And one of the public health nurses, an amazing lady, Ms. Tamiko Ralston, she came up with the idea of training men to become doulas and lactation educators. And she said, not only does it give them a healthy knowledge of the birth process, so they don't feel like they don't have a place, but them being more knowledgeable about it will help them feel like they have ownership in the birth process and could be more participatory in that birth process to support their significant others. And also we know that, doulas and midwives or birth attendants are in essence what they are advocates for our birthing parents, right? And when you look at rates such as 243% of Black women die more than white women because of childbirth related causes, it's because of systematic and structural racism within our healthcare system that we're seeing huge disparities like that. But with an advocate in the room who could help advocate for this mother and speak up for her, that she could receive better care. Well, we thought, what better person to be that advocate to make sure that she receives better care than to be the father of the child. And, so that was a great idea. But then the other, challenge or discussion was, okay, what men are we going to find that feel like they would want to even, do something like that? I've always been a person who doesn't mind doing something different or doing something that nobody else would do. I just saw it as another innovative way for me to really give back to my community. So I volunteered to do it. And while going through my training, as I thought, learned about the history of birth work within the Black and Brown community, since we've really been here in America, it went from being a way that I could contribute and help my community to feeling more like a cultural responsibility and something that I jumped wholeheartedly in. And now I see it as just a part of what I do, something work that I really enjoy doing, and work that I hope to see really proliferate our community more. Since then, I was one of the first. Me and a guy named Adrian Mack, we became the first two men in the history of this state to become certified doulas and lactation educators. And then since then, we've had 9 more men trained using their training in all different, forms of capacity to really mentor and work with other men so that they may feel more secure in their role as parents, and more so in a way so that they stop abdicating their power within their household and in their communities, and feel strong enough to step in that birth process and really support their partners. Because the birth process is another area in which, even though we live in a male-dominated world, men have been rendered almost absent, insignificant. People all the time talk about how, again, this is where that talk or question of masculinity comes in. When people find out that I'm a doula, they're like, wouldn't that women's work? Like, absolutely not. Taking care of your family is family work, and that's for anybody. That's for anybody. But if I had an issue with my masculinity, or was insecure about what my masculinity or whatever would be, it would be hard for me to step into that role and do that, or agree to take the training so that I could do this work, right? But it's because I have more of a fluid vision or perception of what masculinity is, and it isn't put into this cookie cutter vision of what somebody else's standard of what masculinity is. I was able to take that mantle on, full go, and say, I accept this role. This is something that I really want to do. And this is a way in which I want to give back to my community.
Wow. That's absolutely fantastic. That's when I was looking up not black male doulas, but male doulas, because I couldn't find anything on black male doulas. I noticed that there was a lot of articles about the birthing space being a very space for just women. And I think that allowing more men to come into that space and understand what's actually happening there and being a part of that experience will be better for men, and how they define masculinity, how they get to know what femininity is. It's just, to me, it's just an overall great thing. But that's actually all I have for you today.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
Yeah, I know I have a tendency to ramble and kind of scatter, like jump from one thing to the next sometimes. So I hope I didn't do that too much. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk with you.
Okay. And where can we find your work?
Which work is that?
Well, where can we find you? I mean, where can we find, like, how to get in touch with you, like social media, emails, that type of thing?
Yeah. Everybody can always find me on LinkedIn. William Moore, CPE, stands for Certified Perinatal Educator. I do have an Instagram, and that is at ChillTimePod on Instagram. If you want to email me for birth work, when it comes to my doula work and co-parenting work, you can email me at wrmore.cpe.consult@gmail is what it is. That's part of it, because it's too daggone long. And then if you want to get a hold of me about yoga and the stuff that we do with Black Yoga Magazine, now turning into Black Prana Magazine, you can... Yeah. So we'll do a full rollout of our rebranding very soon, so keep an eye out for that. You can find me at william@blackyogamagazine.com. So yeah, either one of those two emails, reach out to me. Be happy to work with you. I consult with the birth work as well. I've, traveled, across the country and done consultations with direct service providers, home visiting nurses on how to do a better job at including men in birth work, all that type of stuff. So working with families, either in group settings, individually or in couples. So yeah. You can reach me at either one of those emails.
If you would like to get in touch with William, be sure to contact him at the information given. Thank you guys so much for listening to Why Yoga. Please remember to share the podcast, review it so that I can know what you think about the podcast. If you're catching this on YouTube, feel free to leave me a comment. If you have any questions, email us at soepodcast.com. soepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for listening. Namaste and have a great day.